My name is Elise, and I'm 34 years old. If you had asked me 5 years ago what I thought rock bottom looked like, I would have painted you a picture of a woman who'd lost everything. Her job, her home, maybe even her partner. But I was wrong. You see, rock bottom isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the silence after a slap. The kind that echoes not just through a room, but through your blood, your bones, and your memory. The day my brother slapped my daughter in front of our entire family. And my parents laughed. That was the day everything in me shifted. But let me take you back first. Because the truth is, the moment he raised his hand to her wasn't where the story began. It was just the moment I stopped pretending I didn't see the rot. Growing up, I always thought my family was just tough love kind of people. You know, gritty, sharp-tongued, but deep down loving. That's how I explained away the teasing, the subtle put-downs, the way my brother was always allowed to be loud, rude, reckless. While I, Elise the sensitive one, was told to toughen up, stop crying, smile more. I never really noticed how much I excused, until I had my daughter. Her name is Willa. She's 6, bright as a sunrise, with curls that defy gravity and a voice that makes people turn their heads in a room. Not because she's yelling, but because there's something alive about her. She's curious, expressive, and yes, sometimes a little loud when she gets excited. But isn't that just being a kid? Apparently not, according to my brother Matthew. Matt's 38. Successful, charming, the golden son. He runs some fancy investment firm in New York and drives down once every few months to visit the family, though he mostly comes to be praised. My parents roll out the red carpet for him. They even dust off the fancy cutlery when he visits. Me. I bring potato salad to cookouts and get told it needs more salt. That weekend, we were all gathered at my parents' house for a small family barbecue. It was nothing extravagant, just hot dogs, burgers, my mom's overcooked ribs, and the usual forced smiles. Willa was excited. She'd been practicing a silly dance she saw on YouTube Kids and wanted to show everyone. I watched her spin and wiggle, her laugh lighting up the backyard. It was one of those moments where your heart grows a size just watching your child be utterly, fearlessly themselves. And then came him. Matthew stood with his arms crossed near the patio table, a glass of scotch in hand like he always had. Willa twirled too close to his shoes, accidentally stepping on them. Before I could even move. A hard, open-handed slap across her small shoulder. The whole yard went quiet. Willa froze. She didn't cry, not right away. She looked confused, embarrassed. Like something inside her didn't quite understand how the fun had turned into pain. And I stood in shock. "Teach your brat some manners," Matt said, sipping his drink. She was being too loud. What broke me wasn't even the slap. It was the laughter. My mother let out this uncomfortable chuckle, like she didn't know how else to respond. My father said, "Well, that's one way to quiet her down," and went back to flipping burgers. No one said anything. No one except Willa, who whispered to me later that night, "Mommy, did I do something wrong?" That question lodged itself in my throat. And it's still there. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything. How normal they acted. How they brushed it off like it was nothing. How used to this dynamic I'd become. But I wasn't that little girl anymore, being told to not be so dramatic. I was Willa's mother now. And no one was going to make her feel small. Not while I was breathing. I didn't say anything that night, but I made a decision. They think I'm the quiet one. The obedient daughter. The one who says, "It's fine," and swallows her hurt. But they forgot something important. I watched them for years. I learned. And now, I have something they don't know about. Something I've kept close to my chest for exactly moments like this. I'm not going to just walk away. I'm going to burn their little empire down. One secret at a time. And if you think this ends with a slap, you've got a lot to learn about me. I know this story is hard to hear. But if you've ever had that moment, where you realized the people you loved were laughing at your pain, then you'll understand. And if you do, I want you to stay with me. Because this story, it's not over. It's just getting started. Only the ones who felt it, really felt it, should stick around. The rest can scroll. But if you're one of us, Hit that like button so I know you're here. And don't forget to subscribe. What's coming next? It's personal. The morning after the slap, I didn't text anyone. Not my mother, not my father, and certainly not Matthew. I sat with Willa at our small kitchen table, watching her draw little suns with faces and flowers that looked like fireworks. Her tiny fingers gripped the crayon tightly, but her smile, it was quieter than usual. She hadn't said much since we left my parents' house. And that silence from a child like Willa, that was loud in its own way. "Sweetheart," I said gently, brushing a curl from her face. "Do you want to talk about yesterday?" She looked up at me with big, searching eyes. Was I bad? Oh God, that question again. "No," I said firmly, pulling her into my lap. "You were wonderful. Your dance was amazing and you didn't do anything wrong. Uncle Matt was wrong. He shouldn't have touched you like that." She hesitated. But everyone laughed. I closed my eyes for a second. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. "Sometimes," I told her, "people laugh when they're too scared to say the truth. But you and I, we say the truth. Always." She nodded slowly and laid her head on my chest. After I dropped her off at school, I parked 2 blocks away from my office and just sat in the car. I couldn't stop thinking about how normal my family made that moment seem. Like Willa was being dramatic. Like I was. But that's how it always was, wasn't it? Even when I was little, I remember Matthew pushing me off our trampoline and my mother yelling at me for crying too loud. When he threw my birthday cake out the window because I didn't give him the first slice, Dad said, "Boys will be boys." I spent 3 decades making excuses for them. But not anymore. It was time I played a different game. See, there's something no one in my family ever really understood about me. I listen. Watch. I remember things. Like how my dad always had a locked file cabinet in the basement that he never opened in front of us. Or how my mother would hide incoming calls from a number she had saved as Dr. M, private. Or how Matt liked to brag. Especially when drunk. "You think I made it to partner because I'm brilliant," he once laughed at Christmas. Please. I have a little leverage on everyone at that firm. That sentence always stuck with me. So that morning, I pulled out an old notebook I kept hidden in the back of my closet. The pages were worn, some corners stained with coffee, others wrinkled from tears I didn't even remember shedding. It was my record. Everything I'd seen, overheard, suspected, and dated. At first, I wrote it just to cope, to convince myself I wasn't crazy. Now, it was more than therapy. It was evidence. They thought I was soft, quiet. They had no idea what I'd been collecting all these years. That same afternoon I made my first move. Called a locksmith. Not just any locksmith. The kind that doesn't ask too many questions, especially when you pay in cash. I told him I needed access to an old file cabinet in my parents' basement for important family documents. He said he could be there by Thursday. Perfect. My parents had dinner reservations that night like they always did on Thursdays. Gave me a window. But I didn't stop there. I also called a friend of mine, Shauna. We hadn't talked in over a year, but she owed me. I'd helped her out when she was going through a nasty divorce and needed a temporary place to stay. I gave her a spare room and never asked for a dime. Shauna worked in records at City Hall. I asked her for anything unusual tied to my parents' property. Liens, zoning changes, private contracts, anything. She hesitated, but I reminded her gently. You still sleep better knowing your ex didn't get the house, right? She agreed to pull what she could and send it to me by the weekend. Something in me was shifting. The old me, passive, compliant Elise, was unraveling. And beneath it was someone I barely recognized. Someone I liked. But I wasn't reckless. I knew better than to go charging in, guns blazing. This wasn't a movie. This was chess. And in chess, you don't go after the king first. You corner him. You trap him. You take everything until he has nowhere left to move. And right now, my brother had no idea the board had even changed. Later that evening I got a text from my mom. Matt says he's sorry. Let's not make this a big thing. He didn't mean it. Please don't ruin family over one mistake. One mistake. Was that what they called it? A mistake. Willa flinched when the phone rang now. She didn't want to go back to Grandma's house. And yet here was my mother, brushing it under the rug again, just like she always did. I stared at the message and typed back 2 words. Noted. Thanks. No anger. No explanation. Just enough to make her think I'd let it go. That was the beauty of staying calm. They always underestimated calm. The real twist. The more I dug, the stranger things got. One of Shauna's early findings revealed something odd. Our family property? It was technically not in my father's name anymore. It had been quietly transferred to a private holding company 2 years ago. And guess who signed off on it? Matthew. Now, why would my brother have signing authority over our family home? Unless he'd been planning something for a long, long time. And that, right there, was the crack in the dam. I'm telling you this because if you've ever had someone tell you family is everything, while stomping all over your peace, your truth, your child, then I need you to listen carefully. You are not overreacting. You are not crazy. You are not alone. And this is the start of the unraveling. They don't know it yet, but I'm already 10 steps ahead. If this part of my story felt like something you've lived, or something you've survived, don't let it sit in silence. Tap the like button so I know you're listening. Drop a comment if you've ever had to pretend something didn't hurt. And stay right here. Because the next part, let's just say, the basement doesn't just hold files. Hold secrets. I don't know what I expected to find in that basement file cabinet. Maybe some old tax records, birth certificates, something boring but useful. But what I actually found changed everything. Thursday evening, my parents were out at their usual overpriced dinner spot, the kind of place where they could pretend to be the perfect suburban couple while ordering a second bottle of wine and judging the waiter's tie. I arrived at their house exactly 5 minutes after they left. Had the key. Had the plan. And I had 30 minutes. The locksmith, his name was Danny, was quick and discreet. He got the cabinet open in under 2 minutes, barely breaking a sweat. Inside it was organized almost obsessively so. Manila folders, all labeled in my father's tight, mechanical handwriting. Some labels were expected: taxes, property, insurance. But then I saw it. A file labeled settlement, EW. EW. My initials. I grabbed the file with trembling hands. Inside were printed emails, bank documents, and legal correspondence I didn't understand at first. Then it clicked. Back when I was 20, I got into a minor car accident. I was in college, working 2 part-time jobs and exhausted. It wasn't even my fault. The other driver had run a red light. But somehow my father convinced me to let the family lawyer handle everything. I remember signing a few documents, being told not to worry. But what I didn't know was that the settlement, a check for $75,000, was never deposited in my name. It went into a trust account, under Matthew's control. I felt my throat tighten. There it was, black and white. Name, check. And my brother's name underneath the word trustee. All these years. All those months I ate ramen noodles, borrowed textbooks, begged my way through scholarships, and he had my money. Suddenly the slap wasn't just a slap. It was a symbol. It was power, authority, entitlement. Matthew didn't hit Willa because she was being loud. He hit her because in his mind we were still beneath him. Still the women in the family who needed keeping in line. And my parents, they helped build that pedestal for him. Brick by brick, lie by lie. Copied every document. Took photos front and back and emailed them to myself. Then I carefully resealed the folder and put it back exactly the way I found it. I left no trace. But inside me something permanent had changed. Later that night, I sat on my couch while Willa slept upstairs. I poured myself a glass of wine, not to relax but to breathe, to take in the sheer weight of what I'd discovered. My brother had stolen from me. My parents knew. Maybe not every detail but enough. They covered for him. Enabled him. lied to me over and over again. And now, they were trying to gaslight me into thinking a grown man slapping a child was just a mistake. It was never just one moment. It was decades. Suddenly, all their little comments echoed back through me. You always overthink things, Elise. Matt's under a lot of pressure. Don't stir the pot, sweetheart. You're not a victim, stop acting like one. But this time, I wasn't acting. The next day, I made an appointment with a lawyer. A different one. Someone who didn't know my parents. Someone who couldn't be bought. I brought a printout of the documents I found. The lawyer was a woman named Jordan Hart. Sharp eyes. Didn't blink much. She flipped through the papers, her expression unreadable. When she finally looked up at me, she said, "You have a case." My heart thumped. "Not just for the money," she added. "For fraud. Possibly more." I wanted to cry. Not because I was sad, but because someone finally looked at me like I wasn't crazy. Like what happened mattered. Jordan warned me it wouldn't be easy. Family lawsuits never were. But we could start by freezing the trust account. That would make Matthew take notice. No. I wanted him to notice. I wanted him to feel that first crack beneath his feet. The kind of tremor that told him, "You're not untouchable anymore." But the most unexpected moment came 3 nights later. Willa was asleep, the house was quiet, and I was scrolling through old photos on my phone. I found a picture from last Christmas. Willa on Matt's lap, smiling. His hand on her shoulder. I'd never noticed before, but his fingers were white-knuckled. Controlling. There was fear in her eyes. Even then, I missed it. And that made me angrier than anything. The anger didn't boil over. It simmered quietly, focused, because now it wasn't just about revenge. It was about rewriting the story my family thought they'd authored. They called me emotional. Fine. I'd weaponize it. They called me dramatic. But they wouldn't forget this drama. But before I did anything public, I needed to confirm one last thing. Something I hadn't dared dig into until now. Because if I was right, the biggest secret hadn't even come to light yet. There was a reason Matthew had access to that settlement money. A reason my parents let him. And it had something to do with what happened when I was 17. Something I'd tried to forget. But I couldn't. And now, I wouldn't. If this feels heavy, it's because it is. But sometimes the only way out is through. And I need you here with me because what I'm about to open up, it's something I've never said out loud. There are memories we tuck away so deep, they almost stop feeling real. Like scenes from a movie we once watched alone and forgot to finish. But trauma doesn't forget. It lingers. In our posture, our choices, our nightmares. And mine. It lived behind a locked door I had painted over in my mind again and again. Till now. I didn't want to go back to it. I didn't want to remember the summer I turned 17. But I had no choice. Because something about that year kept nagging at me. Back then, Matthew had just left for college, and I'd been granted a rare sliver of peace at home. My parents were distracted. Dad with work, Mom with her book club that was more about wine than novels. I remember reading in the backyard, lying in the sun, thinking maybe things were getting better. But it didn't last. One evening, Matthew came home unexpectedly for the weekend. There was no reason, no warning. Just showed up with a new haircut and that smug grin that always meant trouble. First he acted normal. Charming even. He brought me a college sweatshirt, made jokes about my boring summer, even helped with dinner one night. Then something changed. I don't remember exactly when. But I remember the feeling. He became distant. And quick to snap. He'd come into my room without knocking. Took my phone once, saying it was for my own good. He started telling my parents I was hanging out with the wrong kind of friends, even though I barely left the house. One night, I overheard him and my father arguing. I was supposed to be asleep, but the sound of voices pulled me to the top of the stairs. "She knows something," Matt hissed. "She's not stupid. She's 17, Matt," Dad said quieter. "She doesn't know what she saw." That line never left me. Back then, I thought maybe they were talking about Mom's affair rumors. or the neighbor's son who was arrested. But now, after finding that settlement file, after seeing how much they'd hidden from me, I wasn't so sure. What had I seen? Why did they sound afraid? And why did I end up in therapy that fall? Pieces were starting to come together. Ugly, misshapen pieces that didn't quite form a picture yet. But I could feel the shape of it. Something bad happened that summer. And I had blacked it out. So I did something that terrified me. I called my old therapist, Dr. Jean Talbot. She had seen me through the hardest months of my life at 19. When I called, her voice was warm, familiar. "I always knew you'd call again," she said. "You were one of the ones who got away from it." "From what?" I asked. She hesitated. "From your family." We scheduled a session. 2 days later, I sat across from her in her small, sunlit office. Smelled like lavender and old books. I told her everything. Willa's slap. The file cabinet. The settlement. The lawyer. And then finally, I asked the question I'd buried for 17 years. "Why did I stop coming to you?" She looked at me for a long time. "Elise," she said gently, "do you remember when your father threatened to pull your tuition?" My breath caught. No. You were going to college that fall. Your sessions were helping. You were opening up. Remember that memory you started to talk about? The night you said someone came into your room and stood at the foot of your bed. My skin went cold. I did remember that. Barely. A flicker in the back of my mind. I always told myself it was a dream. "You were starting to recall something traumatic," she continued. "The moment you started naming it, your family shut it down." I sat there frozen. I couldn't speak. Couldn't even cry. "Elise," she said again. "You were scared of someone in your home." Not vaguely. Specifically. "You didn't name him then, but I think you knew." My hands trembled in my lap. "Matthew." Was it possible? I wanted to say no. I needed to say no. But I couldn't. 'Cause deep down, I'd always known something wasn't right. Dr. Talbot handed me a small journal. "Start writing what comes up. Even fragments. Your brain locks something away for a reason. But now it's ready." When I got home that night, I sat in my bedroom with the journal on my lap and stared at a blank page for almost an hour. And then it came. Memory. I was in bed. Lights off. My bedroom door opened. Heard breathing. I couldn't see a face, just a silhouette. Broad shoulders. Standing still. Not moving. Just watching. I remember whispering, "Matt." No answer. Just more breathing. And then the door shut. I was shaking. In the present. I didn't know what it meant. Not yet. But something dark had been living inside my chest for years. And now it wanted air. I closed the journal, locked it in my nightstand, and went to check on Willa. She was asleep, curled around her stuffed tiger, mouth open slightly. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "You're safe. I swear to you. You're safe." But I didn't sleep that night. Because the next morning I got a call from my lawyer. "Elise," Jordan said, "we have a bigger problem." "What now?" I asked. "There's a trust. New one. Created just last year. With your daughter's name on it." Froze. "What?" "It's under Matthew's name again. As trustee." My stomach dropped. That meant he was planning something. Not just in the past. With Willa. And whatever it wasn't just about money. It was about control. Maybe worse. If you've ever wondered how far your family would go to protect their secrets, or how close your child came to the same pain you barely escaped, then you understand why I can't stop now. This isn't just a story anymore. It's a warning. I never thought I'd see the day when I'd feel afraid for my daughter while she was around her own family. But that's exactly where I found myself. After the call with Jordan, I couldn't breathe right for hours. A trust, set up in Willa's name. With Matthew as the trustee. Didn't make sense. She's only 6. Why would my brother have control over anything connected to her? I asked Jordan for everything. Every document, signature, account detail. She promised to send it all. But while I waited, I couldn't sit still. I started pacing my living room, looking at every photo frame like it was a puzzle piece I'd missed. Because something was happening, something that stretched beyond old resentment or forgotten checks. This wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about Willa. And I didn't know if I was already too late. I needed answers. From someone inside. Someone who could give me a glimpse behind Matthew's perfect curtain. So I did something I hadn't done in over 3 years. I called my cousin Chelsea. Now, Chelsea and I were never close. But she was one of those family members who saw everything and said nothing. She always knew when something was off. But she also knew how to survive this family, by keeping her head down. Still, when I told her what had happened, Matthew slapping Willa, my parents laughing, there was a long pause. And then, in a low voice, she said, "Elise, you need to check the custody documents." "What custody?" asked, heart racing. "The ones from when Willa was born. When you were still in the hospital. Your dad made a big deal about having something notarized. Just in case something happened to you." I didn't think much of it at the time. But it was weird. Froze. My ears rang. Back then, I just had Willa via emergency C-section. I was out of it, exhausted, full of meds. I barely remembered the days after. Just flashes, nurses, beeping machines, someone handing me a clipboard. Had they tricked me into signing something? Chelsea added. Your dad told everyone the family needed to be prepared. Said he was helping protect Willa if anything went wrong. Wrong like what? Thanked her. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with Willa's baby album open in front of me, trying to connect the dots. Why would my parents create legal control around Willa? Why Matthew? And why now? Why a second trust? The next day, Jordan sent over the documents. They were real. A trust created last year in Willa's name, funded by a mysterious wire transfer from a corporate account I didn't recognize. And listed beneath the trustee field. Matthew J. Whitaker. My brother. But there was more. Tucked into the scanned files was a clause I hadn't expected. In the event of the mother's incapacity, the trustee may act in loco parentis until a formal guardianship petition is approved. I felt the air leave my body. In loco parentis. In place of the parent. So, if anything happened to me, if I was found unfit, mentally unstable, or simply gone, Matthew would have the right to act as Willa's guardian. And the money, it would be in his control. That's when I realized. The slap, the laughter, the emails, the silence. They weren't isolated. They were tests, pokes at the boundaries, seeing if I'd fight, if I'd break, and if I did, they'd be ready to take her, my daughter. I ran to Willa's room that night. She was asleep in her glow-in-the-dark unicorn pajamas, one arm flung over her pillow like she'd been mid-dance even in her dreams. I knelt beside her bed and cried, not because I was afraid, but because I was done pretending I wasn't. The next morning I made 3 calls. First to Jordan. Freeze everything. All accounts, all trusts, anything with Willa's name. Today. Second, to a private investigator I found through a domestic attorney blog. His name was Colt Rhodes. Former NYPD, now a full-time shadow. And third, I called the principal at Willa's school. I told her, calmly, carefully, that no one other than me was allowed to pick Willa up. No uncles. No grandparents. No exceptions. She agreed. Then I asked for security footage of the past week's pickups and drop-offs. She hesitated, but she didn't say no. And thank God. 'Cause that afternoon I saw it. Tuesday 2:16 p.m. A black SUV pulled into the lot. Willa was on the curb with her teacher. The car didn't stop. Didn't open the window. Just sat there for 10 seconds. And then pulled away. It wasn't my car. Wasn't a teacher. Wasn't another parent. I zoomed in. The plate was partially blocked by glare, but I saw a shape in the driver's seat. Queerjaw. Dark sunglasses. White dress shirt. And on the dashboard, a Yale alumni sticker. Matthew. He had been watching. He wasn't just trying to hurt me emotionally. He was tracking us. I printed the photo. Circled the details. sent it to Jordan, Colt, and, against my better judgment, my mother. I wrote, "If anything happens to my daughter, the police won't be the first ones I call." Her reply, "Nothing. Silence. Like always." But silence tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? So now I'm here, writing this not because it helps me sleep, because I don't sleep anymore, but because I need you to understand something. If you've ever been treated like you were overreacting, if you've ever been made to feel like you're the problem while someone else chips away at your peace, if you've ever had your instincts dismissed, your voice minimized, you're not crazy, you're not wrong. You're just the first in your family to wake up. And sometimes that makes you the enemy. But you're not alone. If you've ever had that gut feeling that something wasn't right, hit that like button so I know you're one of us. Comment if you've had to protect your child from someone you once trusted. There's a particular kind of silence you feel before a confrontation. It's not peaceful. It's the kind of silence that comes right before a storm, when the wind holds its breath, when every creak of the floorboard sounds like a warning. That's the silence I stepped into the night I went back to my parents' house. I didn't tell them I was coming. I didn't ask permission. I simply showed up. 'Cause I was done asking. I told Willa I had an adult thing to handle and dropped her off at Shauna's place. Shauna didn't ask questions. She just looked me in the eye and said, "Whatever this is, make it count." I pulled into my parents' driveway at 7:03 p.m. The porch lights were on. My mother's car was in the usual spot. My father's golf clubs leaned by the door, still dusty from the last family cookout. The same house, the same yard. But I wasn't the same woman. I walked up and rang the bell once. My mom answered. "Elise," she blinked. "What are you? I need to talk to you and Dad." Both of you." She hesitated for a second. I saw her scan my face, looking for emotion, for a crack. She didn't find one. She stepped aside. "He's in the den." The air inside the house was stale, scented with artificial lemon and the kind of perfume only women who still use landlines seem to own. I walked in without taking off my shoes. My father looked up from the TV. "Elise, to what do we owe the—" "Turn it off," I said. He blinked, surprised. "Excuse me." I said turn off. The remote clicked. Silence. I sat across from them, dropping a folder onto the coffee table. Printed photos, documents, bank records. Everything Jordan had compiled. And I said 3 words. "Start explaining yourselves." My mother's hands trembled as she reached for the papers. My father didn't touch them, just stared. After a beat he spoke first. "This is a misunderstanding." I laughed. "Once. Oh really? Because it looks like you handed my daughter over to Matthew, on paper, and hoped I wouldn't notice." My mother shook her head. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Mom? Enlighten me." My father finally leaned forward. "You were unstable back then. After you had Willa. You were emotional." "I had just had a C-section," I snapped. "I was exhausted. Not incompetent. You weren't working. You were alone," he continued. "Matt was successful, dependable. We thought if something ever happened to you, you thought you'd hand my child over to him like a project," I spat. "Don't be dramatic," my mother whispered. There it was again. That word, dramatic, followed me like a curse. But not anymore. I looked at them, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see parents. I saw architects, builders of a carefully designed structure, one where Matthew was always the pillar, and I was the cracked wall, patched with silence and shame. "Did you think I'd never find out?" I asked quietly. "Did you think I'd just disappear? Let him raise my child like some sick do-over of everything he ruined in this house?" My mother's voice cracked. "He wouldn't hurt her, Elise. He wants to help." "He slapped her," I snapped. "And you laughed. Don't tell me he wants to help." My father stood. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I stood too, chest tight, voice shaking, but not from fear, from fury. "You want to talk about proportion? Then let's talk about what happened when I was 17. The room went still. My mother's face turned pale. My father blinked once, then looked away. I remembered, I said. Him in my doorway, watching me sleep, breathing. I remembered it. My mother whispered, "No, you don't. Don't tell me what I do and don't remember. Do. And if you tell me I'm wrong again, I'll walk out of here and you'll never see me or Willa again." She started crying. "You were confused. He was just checking on you." "Really?" Yes. "Is that what you tell yourself when you sleep at night? That you raised a protector and not a predator?" My father didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just stared past me. I turned to him. "You knew," I said. Silence. "You've always known. And you didn't just look away. You handed him another child." "My child." He sat back down slowly, as if he'd just aged 10 years in 1 minute. And then, quietly, bitterly, he said, "Do what you have to do." That's when I knew. There was no fixing this. No apology coming. No redemption arc. There was just the truth. And what I would choose to do with it. I gathered the folder. I'll be filing a restraining order tomorrow. On Matthew. And on both of you, if I have to. "Elise, please," my mother choked out. "Don't do this. Don't break the family." "You already broke it," I said. "I'm just picking up the pieces for my daughter." And with that I walked out. Down the same porch steps I used to climb as a kid. Past the mailbox where I dropped my first college application. Past the yard where I once believed birthdays meant happiness. I didn't look back. Not once. Because I wasn't walking away in shame this time. I was walking away with power. I know some of you watching this think it can't happen to you. That your family might be controlling, may be cold, but not this. But if there's one thing I've learned, monsters don't always hide under the bed. Sometimes they hide in birthday cards, in family dinners, in baby trust funds. And they smile while they do it. He called me the next morning. Not a text. Not an email. Oh. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. And again. The 4th time I answered. I didn't say anything. Just let the silence speak. "Elise." Matthew's voice crackled through the speaker, cold and clipped. "What the hell did you do?" Still I said nothing. "You froze the trust," he hissed. "Do you even understand what you've set in motion?" I let that hang for a moment. Then calmly I said, "I understand you don't get to control my daughter." There was a pause. Heavy one. Then, "You're making a mistake." "No," I whispered. "I made one when I let you near her." Hung up. My heart pounded for an hour afterward, but I didn't regret it. Until the letter arrived 2 days later. It came in a plain white envelope. No return address. Just my name written in sharp, slanted letters. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You're not as stable as you think. Maybe someone should remind the court what happened when Willa was born. Postpartum hallucinations. Prescription abuse. Panic attacks. We all remember. Do you?" There was no signature. But I didn't need one. It was Matthew. He was escalating. He wanted me rattled, off balance, scared. But he underestimated one thing. I did remember those things. And I wasn't ashamed anymore. The week after Willa was born was one of the hardest of my life. My body was broken. My mind foggy. I hadn't slept more than an hour a night. I cried at the sound of her cries. I doubted everything I did. I thought I was failing. And my family used that against me. Twisted it into a narrative. An unfit mother. Fragile. Broken. But you know what? I didn't stay broken. I got therapy. Built a home. I started a business. I raised a daughter who knows how to speak for herself, love loudly, and ask questions. And Matthew. He stayed exactly the same. Entitled. Arrogant. Dangerous. I took the letter to Jordan. "This is intimidation," she said. "We'll build it into the restraining order request. And I'll request expedited review from the judge." Then she paused. Looked at me over the top of her glasses. "Elise, how far are you willing to go?" I didn't blink. As far as I have to. That night, Colt, the PI, sent me footage from outside Matthew's house. I didn't ask for it. He just sent it. A time-stamped video from 11:48 p.m. Matthew standing in his driveway, pacing, talking to someone on the phone. He was screaming, "She's unstable. I have proof. I'll bury her." He kicked his car door so hard the alarm blared. Then, slowly, he turned and stared right at the camera. He knew he was being watched. And he didn't care. Because men like Matthew, they never believe the rules apply to them. They think money is a bulletproof vest. But he was wrong. The next day, I went to court with Jordan and filed a petition to terminate the trust. Both of them. The one from my settlement. And the one in Willa's name. I submitted evidence of the slap. A letter. The footage. Custody clause. The clerk's eyes widened. Then she stamped it. "Your court date is set," she said. "For the following Monday." I walked out of the courthouse into a cold wind. But I didn't pull my coat tighter. I let it hit me. Because it meant I was alive. Wait, finally free. But I also knew it wasn't over. That night I tucked Willa in. She looked up at me and whispered, "Mommy, do I still have to see Uncle Matt?" I knelt beside her. "No, baby," I said. "Not ever again." She smiled and said, "Good." He always smelled like old coins. Made me laugh. And then I cried in the hallway alone because even at 6, she knew. They always know. The next morning my mother called. I didn't answer. Then she texted, "You're going to destroy this family." I stared at the words for a long time. Then I typed back. It was already destroyed. I'm just the only one brave enough to admit it. If you're still here, still watching, still breathing this story with me, thank you. Because telling the truth is lonely. But not as lonely as pretending nothing ever happened. If you've ever been threatened just for speaking up, hit that like button. Let me know you exist. Courtrooms aren't like the movies. They're colder, slower, more clinical than climactic. The kind of place where people whisper even when they're angry, where eye contact is a weapon and silence feels louder than shouting. But the moment I stepped into that courtroom, I wasn't scared. Not anymore. Because this time I wasn't the one hiding something. Matthew sat at the defense table with his lawyer, a man in a $1,000 suit and a smirk he probably practiced in the mirror. My parents weren't there. At least not in the room. But I knew they were watching. They always found ways to watch. Jordan sat beside me, calm as ever, flipping through documents like a surgeon with scalpels. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her evidence would speak for itself. The judge, a middle-aged woman with steel-gray hair and tired eyes, called us to begin. Jordan opened with precision. "This is not just a case about a trust. It's about control. It's about a woman whose autonomy was violated twice. Once as a daughter, again as a mother. And it's about preventing a man from using money, legal tricks, and family silence to continue that abuse." Matthew didn't flinch. But I saw his jaw tick. He hated being framed as anything but the successful older brother. And now that image was being peeled off in public. The first piece of evidence. The trust fund he managed after my settlement. Documents showed it was never disclosed to me, never released, and never properly accounted for. The second. The new trust created in Willa's name, with that terrifying in loco parentis clause. I watched the judge's eyebrows rise when she read that part. And then came the video footage. Willa's slap. Laughter. Matthew's SUV circling the school parking lot. His screaming in the driveway. And finally, the anonymous letter printed and enlarged. The room was silent. Then it was Matthew's lawyer's turn. He tried to twist everything. He said I was emotionally unstable, that I had a history of dramatics, that the trust had been created out of love and preparation, and that Matthew never had any intention of taking custody unless Elise became a danger to the child. I laughed quietly, and the judge noticed. Then, it was my turn to speak. I stood at the witness stand, raised my hand, and swore to tell the truth. And I did. I told the court about my childhood. About the gaslighting, the favoritism, the secrets. I told them about how my brother always walked just barely inside the line. How he made me feel crazy for asking questions, emotional for having boundaries. I talked about the night of the slap. About how my daughter cried. About how my own parents laughed. I told them I remembered what I wasn't supposed to remember. About Matthew watching me while I slept. About the memory that came back piece by piece. About my therapist confirming the trauma signs I buried. Then I said this. You can call it just a trust. But when someone's been stealing your voice since you were 17, any document they sign with your child's name on it is an act of war. The courtroom stayed silent for a long time. When I stepped down, I didn't look at Matthew. He didn't deserve to be seen. The judge recessed the hearing for 30 minutes. I sat outside in the hallway, knees bouncing, stomach tight. And then, Jordan came out. Preliminary rulings in, she said. We won the freeze. Full stop. Blink. The trusts. Terminated. Pending final review. He's out. Permanently. I didn't cry. Not then. Not until I picked up Willa from Shauna's that afternoon and she hugged me around the neck and whispered, You smell like flowers today. Like something had bloomed inside me. Something peaceful. Something alive. But that wasn't the end. Because 2 hours later, as I was unloading groceries from the car, I found another letter taped to my front door. No envelope. No handwriting. Just printed words on clean white paper. You think you won. But this isn't over. Froze. Looked up. Nothing. No cars. No neighbors. No signs. Just quiet. But it wasn't the same quiet as before. This one had teeth. And even though I'd just beaten him in court, I knew this story wasn't finished. Because Matthew wasn't just angry now. He was desperate. And desperate people. They're dangerous. If this part left you holding your breath, tap that like button so I know I'm not alone out here. They say after the storm comes peace. But what they don't tell you is sometimes there's another storm waiting behind it. Quieter one. Darker. Martyr. One that doesn't knock. It waits until you let your guard down. 3 days after the court ruling, I started breathing again. Not deeply. Not fully. But enough. Willa was laughing again, really laughing. We had pancakes with strawberries. She drew a picture of our little house and wrote, Me plus mommy equals strong. It made me cry in the kitchen while she colored on the floor. For the first time in years I felt safe. So when the doorbell rang that Sunday afternoon, I didn't think twice. I was barefoot, holding a laundry basket. Still wearing the oversized college hoodie I always wore when I felt soft. But when I opened the door, it wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't a delivery. It was Matthew. Standing there like he had every right in the world to be on my porch. Wearing that smug face that somehow hadn't cracked, even after everything. Get off my property, I said instantly. I just want to talk, he said. No. You want to manipulate. You want to corner me like you always did. It's not going to work this time. He stepped closer. And that's when I saw it. Not rage. Not remorse. But calculation. You think you've won, he said quietly. But you don't know what I have. You don't know what's coming. I didn't flinch. What are you going to do, Matt? Sue me. Smear me. Send more letters. His eyes narrowed. You always did underestimate me. No, I said. I just finally stopped fearing you. I reached behind the door. Grabbed my phone. Hit record. You're being recorded, I said clearly. He didn't even blink. You're spiraling, he said. You're going to make a mistake. And when you do, I'll be ready. Leave, I repeated. Now. Or I call the police. Still he didn't move. You really think I'm the only one who wants Willa, he said. That stopped me. What? Let's just say. You've made some powerful people very nervous. You should be careful who you trust. He turned and walked down the steps. Got into a black sedan. Drove off. No license plate on the front. I locked the door behind me and called Jordan, then Colt. Within 24 hours, We had a security system installed. Cameras, floodlights, a direct line to Colt's emergency number. I filed another police report. Showed them the video. They added it to the restraining order file. But that wasn't the part that scared me most. It was what he said about others. Powerful people. What did he mean? Was this bigger than Matthew? Was my family tied to something I never even knew existed? That night, I found myself digging through old storage bins in the attic. Boxes I hadn't touched since I left for college. High school yearbooks, college brochures, a binder of old letters from my mom when I was at summer camp. And at the bottom, a manila folder I didn't recognize. Inside were scans of real estate documents. Indeed, a name I didn't know. A signature that looked like mine but wasn't. The property was in my name. But it had been sold. Years ago. Without my knowledge. I stared at the date. Willa was 6 weeks old. I was still recovering. Still medicated. Still vulnerable. And someone, Matthew, my father, had used my identity to move property under my name and then offload it for cash. Tens of thousands of dollars. Stolen. And suddenly, his words on my porch came back like poison. You think you've won. This wasn't just about Willa. It never had been. I was the loose thread. The one who remembered. The one who asked questions. The one who wasn't supposed to come back. But I had. And now, I was going to unravel everything. If this part had your heart racing, hit that like button. I need to know I'm not the only one watching the pieces fall into place. Comment if you've ever uncovered a truth so dark. You questioned everything about your past. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear, but because of clarity. I finally understood something. This wasn't just a story about one brother with too much control. Or two parents who stayed quiet for too long. This was a story about a machine. A family machine. Polished on the outside, rusted and blood-stained inside. And it had been running for years. Decades even. I was just the first one to jam a wrench into the gears. And now, it was starting to screech. The forged deed in the attic wasn't just proof of theft. It was proof that someone had planned this. That they'd been using my name, my postpartum vulnerability, to quietly siphon away assets. Property I didn't even remember inheriting. And whoever did it, they were counting on me never checking. But I did. Check. I traced the property through the county records. And you know what I found? It had been sold to a shell company. One registered under the name of a man I hadn't seen in 15 years. My Uncle Grant. My dad's younger brother. The black sheep. The one who vanished from family reunions sometime around my junior year of high school, after a very public falling out with my grandfather. I barely remembered him. Just a deep voice, a hand that always offered me a juice box when my dad was yelling, and a whispered warning one Thanksgiving. You think he's proud of you, Elise? He's just proud of how well you obey. At the time I hadn't understood it. But now, I did. Picked up my phone. Googled his name. Nothing on social media. No LinkedIn. No website. But there was an LLC listing tied to a post office box 2 towns over. And a landline number. Called it. It rang 6 times before a voice answered. Low. Rough. Uncertain. Yeah. Pause. Uncle Grant. Silence. Who's this? Elise. Whitaker. Another long pause. Then a soft, bitter laugh. I was wondering when you'd call. I didn't waste time. I found the deed. The shell company. The property you bought in my name. Elise, I didn't steal it. I protected it. What are you talking about? Meet me. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. Iron Bend Diner. Ask for the booth behind the jukebox. Don't tell anyone you're coming. Then he hung up. The next day, I drove with shaking hands. The diner was straight out of a movie. Chrome signs, cracked red booths, the smell of burnt coffee and grease. I slid into the booth he mentioned. He was already there. Older now. Gray stubble. Deep bags under his eyes. But still familiar. Still family. In some strange, fractured way. He looked at me and said, You were never supposed to see that file. Why did you buy the property? Because your dad was trying to sell everything tied to you. Willa's college funds, your inheritance, even your medical settlement. Said it was to streamline family assets. I knew what that meant. Control, I whispered. Grant nodded. I used the shell company to grab that land before he could. Kept it off the books. I figured if he ever tried to come after you legally, you'd still have one asset he couldn't touch. I stared at him, stunned. You protected me. I tried. But I wasn't strong enough to stop him. He looked down at his coffee. You were a kid when I left. But I left because your father made it clear. Anyone who questioned him was cut off. Your mom went along with it. Matthew, he became it. I whispered. They're trying to take Willa. I know, he said. And if you don't stop them, they will. I leaned in. Why now? Why are they doing this now? Grant hesitated. Then he pulled out a manila envelope. Inside, a single printed email. From 5 months ago. Subject line. Transfer plan. Elise/Willa assets. Sender. My father. Recipient. An offshore law firm. In it, my father detailed his plan to restructure all financial assets to secure long-term stability for the Whitaker legacy, pending Elise's cooperation or mental health declaration. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mental health declaration. He was going to institutionalize me. Use my postpartum records. Panic attacks. The journals I kept during recovery. Paint me as unstable. Take everything. Take Willa. I whispered. He was going to erase me. Grant looked me dead in the eyes. Elise, he still might. We left the diner 20 minutes later. Grant handed me a flash drive. Everything I've been collecting. For years. Emails. Financial trails. Audio recordings. Use it. Expose them. Burn it down if you have to. Took it. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt since this began. Armed. Got in my car. Looked in the mirror. And said out loud. You tried to destroy me. Now watch what I do with the truth. If you've ever uncovered a lie so deep it rewired your memories, hit that like button. Let me know I'm not screaming into the void. The truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes. It sets fire to everything you once called home. I didn't go to the press. Not at first. I went to the people who always stood in the shadows, who whispered support but never dared to speak up. My former therapist, an old teacher, 2 of my cousins who had distanced themselves years ago. All of them had stories. About Matthew. About my father. About things that had been swept under thick carpets of tradition, wealth and fear. And when I showed them the flash drive from Uncle Grant, they didn't just believe me. They thanked me. It was like someone cracked a dam. The recordings, voicemails, hushed conversations, plans to phase me out if I didn't remain compliant, were enough to chill any spine. There were spreadsheets too. Proof of forged signatures. Illegally transferred funds. Even hush money paid to someone whose daughter used to babysit Matthew's kids. It was never just about me. It was about how many they'd done this to. Jordan and I prepared everything for court, but this time, I didn't wait for a judge to hand me justice. I recorded a video. Just me. No makeup. No dramatics. Just the truth. I told the story, start to finish. The slap. The silence. The forged documents. The inheritance they tried to rewrite. The daughter they tried to steal that I named names. I uploaded it to YouTube. Within 24 hours, it had over 60,000 views. By the end of the week, 1.2 million. The comments broke my heart and rebuilt it at the same time. Women saying, "You told my story." Men admitting, "I watched this thinking it was just drama. But I see now, it's truth." And then came the fallout. Matthew was suspended from his firm. My father was removed from 2 community boards. The trusts. Permanently dissolved. And Willa. She woke up one morning, looked at me and said, "Mommy, I had a dream you built a big castle with no bad people allowed." I hugged her so hard I thought I'd crush us both. Because maybe that's what this whole thing was. Not a fight, but a rebuild. Of a life, voice, a future where the truth didn't live behind locked doors and birthday cake smiles. And if you're still here, if you've made it through all 11 parts of this story, then you're part of that rebuild too. But listen, don't just walk away. Hit that subscribe button because the story's coming next. They're even bolder. Real revenge stories from people who had nothing and took back everything. But only subscribe if you're grown enough to handle the truth and brave enough to see what real justice looks like. This isn't the end. It's only the beginning. And trust me, what's coming will leave you breathless.